Hello and welcome to this episode of Kynotalk by Kynotec, and this time finally again an English episode. I've had a lot of German episodes lately actually, but I'm very happy to announce that we have Dr. Richard Naylor here on the show, and some guys of you for sure know him, especially the ones who are into detection work, into the bed bug detection work. Why that is the case, I hope that we can ask Richard some of those questions, how he got into the detection topic and into the bed bug topic. And for the rest of the listeners who don't know yet who Richard Naylor is, let me give a brief introduction to you, Richard, and then I hand over the microphone to you. Well, Richard is a scientist, and the word is difficult for me to pronounce. It's entomologist. Is that correctly said? Yeah. So you have to tell us later on what that's about. And I got to know you actually quite a few years ago when I got into the subject of bed bug detection, because I bought bed bugs in your store, the Simic store. And a few months ago, we met actually in Germany at a workshop that Daniela Salk organized in the southwestern part of Germany. And you had a little presentation there, and Chris and me were invited to have to do some detection work with the participants. And I think we had some really nice talks at the dinner table, at the lunch table. Mm-hmm. Talked about dogs, talked about detection, about the bed bugs, and I thought it would be great if we could have a recording and have a podcast together, so more people get to know you and get to know about what your work is about. So thank you for taking the time, Richard, and
thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
So maybe you can give to the audience a better introduction than mine. So who you are, how you got into bed bugs, because that is a very special subject.
Yes, of course. So I did my degree, my first degree at Sheffield University in the UK, and towards the end of my degree, I met a professor who had a pot of bed bugs. This was at the end of the 90s, so bed bugs were very uncommon then, but he had a pot of them, and he was looking for, firstly, he was looking for students to feed his pot of bed bugs. It had a mesh lid, and you have to put it on your arm and just let them suck your blood. And I volunteered. I was in his tutor group. I volunteered and fed his bugs, and then ultimately he employed me for about the next 10 years or more, doing research on bed bugs. We researched aspects of their immune systems and aspects of how they evolved from bats. So I did some field work in Kenya, collecting the ancestors of bed bugs that lived on bats.
Oh, wow!
And then just by coincidence, really, bed bugs became a problem again. Bed bugs have been really scarce for about 50 years, and while I was working on them, they made a dramatic resurgence all over the world. And so there was then suddenly a demand for bed bugs. And because I was keeping them and breeding them, it was easy for me to fill that demand. The demand came from other researchers who wanted to learn about them, and people who wanted to develop products against them, and also from the dog training community who wanted to train up sniffer dogs to find them. And so that was where the Cymex store came from. I made Cymex store to make it simpler for people to buy bed bugs from me. And ultimately it turned into a business which is now employed. I think Cymex Store has been running for kind of 10 to 15 years, and I've been working on bed bugs almost every day for the last close to 25 years now.
Wow, that's impressive actually, having a shop like this with bed bugs. And you also have some other projects. You have the what's it called? It's not a pseudoscent, but the endorphin of the bed bugs.
We do. Yeah, we kind of call it a pseudoscent, but you're right. It's not pseudo. It's real. We extract the pheromones from the bed bugs with a solvent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was
and
the
then
word.
you can take it's the solvent we use is hexane, and you can so you can soak the bed bugs in hexane, and it dissolves the pheromones, and then you can pipette this hexane onto strips of paper or directly into the search environment, and it smells of bed bugs. So it's useful for training dogs. Yeah,
Definitely. Maybe we can dive into that a little later, because for many handlers, and that's my experience, it's hard to trust it, because
yeah, of
they
course,
think like why should that smell of bed bugs?
yeah,
But
yeah,
so you said that the problem with bed bugs for like hotels or private persons was growing in the past years,
yeah,
after you have started working with them.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what's the cause of that?
So bed bugs thrive in places where there's lots of people close together, particularly where there's lots of people sleeping close together, um, and and traditionally we've controlled them with synthetic insecticides. Initially, lots of different classes: pyrethroids, organophosphates, organochlorines, neonicotinoids. Over time, we've gradually we've discovered that some of these things are not nice to have in our environment. Some of them are bad for the environment, or some are bad for us. And we've narrowed that right down to the pyrethroids. So now almost all of the professional insecticides are based on pyrethroids. And because of that overuse of one class of insecticide, bed bugs have become very resistant to them. And I think that's really the most important factor in why their numbers are kind of consistently increasing. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And like we could sense maybe not a reduction, but a reduction of the need of detection dogs during the COVID time.
Yeah.
Was that so? Why was that? And how are bed bugs spreading all over Europe
Yeah.
and the world?
Yeah, we also saw this decline in bedbug activity in the years following COVID, and it was probably at its lowest in 2021, and now it's climbing back up from there, and it probably hasn't quite reached 2019 levels yet, so it's still recovering from pre-COVID, and that's because COVID shut down the transport network, stopped people moving around, and it shut down the hospitality sector, so people couldn't stay in hotels, and this reduced the spread of bed bugs, and it also gave the hotels an opportunity to deal with the bed bug problems that they had at the time, and so this really negatively impacted bed bugs. And we could see that in a few different sources of data around the world, really. Yeah.
And that's actually crazy, because like these few years of COVID and the lockdowns and reduced travel, etc., had such a big impact. Would you have thought of that in the beginning of
Yeah,
COVID?
I mean,
Was
these are the
that
key.
like calculated? Yeah.
Yeah, these are the key factors that
Go ahead.
affect bed bugs. They're transmitted, and they need exactly what was shut down. They need people staying in hotels, like ideally just staying 1 or 2 nights, so there's a high turnover. This seems to be an important kind of factor in what spreads them around, and by stopping it in such a dramatic way, it really had an impact on bed bugs. I could never have predicted it, though. I would never have imagined that COVID would happen and have that impact on the hospitality sector and the transport sector together, which are these two key areas that bed bugs apparently need. Yeah.
And obviously, at least like in Austria, I think, and in the German-speaking countries, the travel habits have changed. So people are more like camping or using their vans to drive somewhere south, etc. Maybe there is less flying and less international traveling. Do you think that's also a cause why it's recovering, so to
Yeah, I
say,
think it's
so
I
slowly?
think it's recovering. That definitely was the case. People were staying much more local, staying on holiday locally rather than traveling. I think it has recovered now. I think that because I get involved in expert witness cases where people have some issue with bed bugs in a holiday resort or something like that, and so I hear about more cases, and so again I'm just aware that I've done 2 of these in the last few weeks, so it seems to be building up again. Yeah.
It sounds like a crime scene.
Yeah, yeah.
Expert witness cases. Wow.
Mm.
There is I think there is a lab in the Czech Republic, who are is it correct to say tracing or tracking the origin of where the bed bugs are
Yeah,
coming from? And I
yeah.
think what
There's a
they
guy called
found out
Andre.
is
Yeah, yeah. Andre
they're coming.
Balvin. Yeah, yeah. He's a friend of mine, and he's done a lot of work, or he's been involved in there's quite a big group of people internationally that have collected samples from around the world and have genotyped them, and you can use and not just the bed bugs, but there's about 100 species in their family group, the Simecidae, and so they've just used the uh, uh, molecular methods in order to untangle their family history so that we can see which ones are related to which ones the most. Yeah.
And it's crazy. So can you tell where the most bed bugs coming from that we are finding then with our dogs here in Europe?
Well, so we know that the transition from bat bugs to the transition to humans, from bats to humans, because it's a bat species really, and it spent millions of years living on bats, and we now know it's been about 245. The latest estimate is 245,000 years ago that they moved from bats to people. But this doesn't happen very often. So we can see that they're really these two populations, the bat bed bugs and the people bed bugs, are very separated. Now that we have this human population, I mean, we know we've had bed bugs in our communities for hundreds of thousands of years. So and they just tend to be centered on the places where human population density is the highest. So, but where do they come from? I mean, they tend to, you can pick them up from anywhere. You can pick them up traveling on public transport, or if you live in a multiple occupancy building. The most common way for you to get bed bugs is from a neighboring flat that already has them, because they move around in buildings very easily, through gaps in mortar and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And that's crazy. So are there actually any benefits that we have from living with bed bugs?
Any benefits? And I'd say that they're 100% a parasite, and they're one of our oldest parasites, one of our oldest urban pests. There aren't many species that we know of that have had a longer association with people. So they're one of our longest standing pests. From really early humans have carried them around. People were probably living in caves when they picked up bed bugs. So bed bugs have just been plaguing us for most of our time in civilization. Yeah.
Is it like ticks? Are they comparable to ticks, or is that again something totally different?
So they're similar. The tick is an arachnid, so tick has 8 legs, and a tick's behavior is to jump on you and bite, and then stay on for a few days and get really full, and then drop off you, and then it'll produce loads of nymphs, and the nymphs will climb up tall stems of grass normally, and as you're walking down a path, they'll jump onto you. So a bed bug likes to live around where you sleep. They rely on hosts that always come back to the same place to sleep every night. And bats are very good for that. But bats are very faithful to a particular cave, and so they make good hosts for bugs. And we're just one of the few other animals that are equally useful. Most animals would be very difficult for bed bugs to parasitize because they move around all of the time. But humans and bats are kind of cave dwellers. They always come back to the same places to sleep, and that's what bed bugs need, because they can't really hold on to us. They come out at night and feed, and then crawl away, and they can't fly and they can't jump. So they rely on a host that behaves in a predictable way. Yeah.
And that was a big learning for me when I was listening to your presentation, and that was how the so-called bed bug streets or corridors are. I couldn't remember the English word, but you know what I mean. In German, it's the Bissstraße. You see where they bit you, and people thought because it's like a strip.
Oh yeah,
It's because the bed bugs are traveling on the body, but you teach us that they prefer to stay on the textile, on the bed or on the sofa, so they try to avoid going onto the skin.
That's right. Yeah.
So they travel.
So you can expect if I was sleeping in this, you could expect bites around here, because they will walk up my clothes and bite. If they walk on your skin, it's much easier to feel them and scratch them. So they just stand right on the edge there, and they'll bite you there. And if they can't get a capillary straight away, they might try again here or try again here, and then you end up with this little row of bites. But they're always along like an edge of the edge of your clothing or the edge of your bed covers, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And is there a difference between like less or more hairy people?
Yeah. More hairy people can feel biting insects generally. There's been a study also from Sheffield, from the same lab that I used to work in, from Sheffield University, that showed that people with it wasn't by me, but it was in my lab, and it showed that people with hairy arms could feel parasites more easily, so they could feel bed bugs or mosquitoes, that kind of thing, more easily. So those hairs are important kind of parasite sensors. So yeah, therefore, yeah, men have an advantage over women. Yeah.
But it like when talking about having then issues or an itchy spot from the bed bug bite, like they bite, they don't like, they're not bees who sting you, they bite you.
That's right. Yeah, they suck blood like a mosquito. Yeah.
Like people say when they go on holidays, they had no mosquitoes at all, and the partner says, I'm full of mosquito bites or stings. And is it like the subjective reaction on the bite, like both have the same amount of bites, but person A reacts less to it than person B? Is that also the case with bed bugs?
Yeah, it can be that. So it can be simply that like women have a warmer body temperature apparently in bed, so they can be more attractive to bed bugs for that reason. It can be that like around a third of people don't react to bites at all. Particularly older people react less. Usually young people react the strongest because they have the healthiest immune system, so they get the biggest, reddest swellings. And old people often don't react, but roughly a third of people don't react to bed bug bites. So it can be that. But there's good studies with mosquitoes that show that different people vary considerably in how attractive they are. And there are things that you can do, like drinking alcohol apparently makes you more attractive to mosquitoes, but smoking cigarettes makes you less attractive to mosquitoes.
Interesting.
And I imagine it could be similar for bed bugs as well, but I haven't seen a similar study yet. Yeah.
But the alcohol might just be like the blood is running easier through the veins because the veins are getting bigger, so that they're more on the surface.
They're easier to feed on. Yeah, or perhaps we just breathe out some like volatiles that they're attracted to. Yeah.
Wow. So you said that you over the years you have become sort of immune to bed bug bites, but in the very beginning you also had some reactions. Over the years, have you realized any problems with sicknesses or something that the bed bugs could?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of research on whether bed bugs can transmit diseases, and there's almost no evidence. There's some very sort of theoretical studies about them transmitting Chagas disease in between mice. So in lab populations of mice, they were able to transmit Chagas disease, and the natural vector of Chagas disease is also a bug. It's a much bigger bug called a kitting bug, and it happens to be similar enough to that it can. In these kind of controlled conditions with populations of mice with and without the disease, you can show that bed bugs can vector it. But that's really the only one. They can also pick up MRSA, resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which but this is kind of a physical mode of transfer. You can pick this up off handling things. So disease transmission, at least for bed bugs, has been shown to be really not a great concern.
Because of course sometimes our handlers, and myself included, when we find something and it's a bigger find, we try to collect some to not always buy the ones from the laboratory, but also like the wild ones,
that's good.
But depending on where we find them, of course many handlers hesitate to feed them themselves. So you'd say there is not a
it's understandable, but there's good evidence that they're not a concern when it comes to disease vectoring. But some people do react quite strongly. Individual handlers might find that they get blistering reactions, or sometimes even like a systemic response. Our web guy who works with me in our business fed some on himself, just 10 or something, and it was enough to elicit kind of a systemic immune reaction. He could feel his tongue was getting itchy and starting to swell, so we took him to A&E, and he was completely fine. But it shows that some people can have a systemic reaction to bed bug bites.
Wow, that's very interesting. So So yeah, but of course it feels weird, like if you have these messy apartments and or also people who are drug addicted.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
I
I
understand people that they don't want to
Yeah,
don't want
yeah,
to
I
feed
do too.
those
It
ones.
crosses my mind every time because I collect populations from all over the world. Like pest controllers
Okay,
collect them for me, and yeah, so I receive
sure.
populations from all over. And
Yeah,
it's really my only way of getting these kind of populations to establish in culture is to feed them on myself. I
yeah.
can use membrane systems, but generally membrane systems have a poorer feeding success. And so generally, if it's a small population and I'm trying to cultivate more of them, then I tend to feed them
Mm.
on myself because it works the best. Yeah.
So me for myself, I figured out that if I don't have them in the little lures, so I put them on my skin, and
Yeah.
um, or I have them in the lures that I cleaned before feeding, I have less reaction. Do you think that um, everything, like what's a nicer word than shit in English? I have no clue. But if they don't, like if they're not in this dirty place where they shit
Yeah.
and they get rid of their skin, is it
Yeah.
likely to have less reaction?
It's possible. Yeah, you can react to all of that material. Yeah, what your body's sensitive to
Hmm.
can also differ from person to person. But yeah, um, yeah, I find big differences between different populations, and I tend to find that if there's one population I feed regularly, I stop reacting to it. But then if I feed some
Mhm.
new ones that I haven't fed before or haven't fed for a long time, I'll react more strongly.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So maybe you could tell the audience how the bed bugs are attracted by human, and how they find their ways to them.
Yeah, so bed bugs generally like to hide within about a meter of where they feed. Sometimes it could be 2 meters, but ideally close to where they can feed. And they do that because their nymphs are only like 1 millimeter long, and so where they hatch out from, they have to have like convenient access to food because they can't live very long and they can't travel very far. And so they'll be sitting in a little crevice. They aggregate, so they like to hide together. So they'll be hiding together in a little cluster. Uh, and when they're hungry, they'll become very sensitive to carbon dioxide and also vibration. So they'll be able to detect when there's a person sleeping nearby by the elevated carbon dioxide from that person's breath, and that will trigger foraging. And they'll come out of their little crevice and run around. And it'll be quite random initially. They can run off in any direction, but when they get within a certain range, they can detect body heat, and that becomes the most important cue for steering them into where the host is. So so
Mhm.
carbon dioxide for triggering foraging, and then body heat for homing in. And then they'll feed, and feeding will take like a couple of minutes or something like that, and then they'll find their way back to the harborage, and they find their way home again by following aggregation pheromones, which are the pheromones that are produced by the other bugs in the harborage, and probably also from the feces and that kind of thing, which tends to build up around the harborages. You know, the harborages over time become really like they smell quite pungent to us. They have quite a distinctive smell,
Mm.
and so yeah, that seems to be important for luring the bugs back there. Yeah.
So there, we had once a case where a dog was indicating on a bed bug bite, or
Ah, wow.
like a and obviously that was an odor that should attract bed bugs. And I
Yeah.
immediately thought of what you're selling. Um, could it be that it was the same, or the same idea to attract them and then just get them stuck on a certain material, or are there different odors that would also attract bed bugs?
Um, there's lots of groups working on making attractants for bed bugs, and I think that the evidence for them working well right now is not very good. There's lots of people doing chemical analysis and trying to produce a synthetic version that works at attracting them.
Mm-hmm.
But so far, I think the problem hasn't been solved. Although there's plenty of products on the internet that claim to have an attractant, but in my tests, I can't find good evidence for them working. What you
Interesting.
can
Yeah.
do is take the dirty filter paper, that black crusty filter paper, and soak it in acetone, and then pipette the acetone into a hide, and the bed bugs will go and hide in it. In arena trials, you can show a clear difference. I think
Wow.
5 times more bed bugs went to the hide that was treated with the acetone extract the one that had no treatment. So the theory works. You should be able to make an odor that attracts the bugs to the harborage, but it's not a simple process to make a recipe that's convincing to a bed bug. And you can, although I guess 15 to 20 compounds have been identified that bed bugs produce, and some of those are being cross-checked with antennograms, where they can measure what the antennae on the bed bug are able to detect, so they can home in on which chemicals are likely to be important as attractants. But even once you've identified these key compounds that bed bugs produce and can detect, it's not simple to make a lure. They have to be compounds that are economically viable to produce. There are some compounds that are quite expensive to produce, so you can only make in very small quantities. And so the lures that people make are very kind of crude estimations of what should be in there. Maybe they contain 4 or 6 of the key components. Yeah, and the other problem is that there seems to be a threshold effect, where above a particular threshold, some of these compounds have a repellent effect. They're an alarm pheromone which can make the bugs run away, and it's very difficult to make a lure which releases it at a low enough rate to be attractive, because if it's too strong, then it becomes a repellent. So it's not a simple subject. Lots of people have spent many years trying to solve it, and I don't think it's been cracked yet.
Yeah. So still dogs are needed to detect them.
I think so. I think dogs are dogs are phenomenal in what they can, in the numbers that they can find and how quickly. Yeah, I'm always surprised when I see dogs working. Yeah.
And obviously not only to the bugs themselves, the odor is important. Do you think that there is an impact on the quality or the type of odor of the bed bugs by producing different pheromones from bugs that are sitting like hours or days at a single spot, or the ones that we used in the little lures, and maybe by accident one of the lures fell on the ground and shaked around the bed bugs? Do you think there is a danger of imprinting a wrong odor picture into the dogs?
So the dogs. So one of the most abundant chemicals that the bugs seem to produce is E2-hexanol. And this is this threshold affected one, where it seems to be. Well, there are some publications that suggest that it's an attractant at low concentration, but becomes repellent at high. But whether the bug is using it, it almost makes no difference for the dog. The chemical is there in abundance. Even if you don't shake it, it's still there at lower levels, but they have the ability to release plumes of it. But that if the dog can detect that chemical, then it doesn't matter. I don't think it would matter. I don't think it would matter if the dog was honed in on that. But certainly the bug will become much more easy to find. Like if you shake them up or squash them or something like that, and they release this alarm pheromone, kind of like a stink bug does, then it's easily detectable by us, from maybe half a meter or a meter away. It's quite a strong smell.
Do they also produce it when you drown them in the solvent?
Well, it will, like, it's in reserves in their cuticle, and so when you soak them in the solvent, definitely that will soak out into along with all of the other volatiles. The hexanol and octanol and a bunch of similar chemicals.
Still, that's fascinating. So, how does that work actually with the solvent? Why can we assume that this, after you let it rest for half an hour, and it doesn't smell of alcohol anymore? Why would that smell of alive bed bugs? Because that's what we were interested in, detecting alive bed bugs.
The technique isn't new. People working on insect pheromones for decades have used these solvents, usually hexane or pentane, to soak the pheromones off the insects. And you can do so. In fact, I did it in my zoology degree, in my undergraduate degree. We had to rinse some beetles in hexane, and then dip a glass rod into the hexane and evaporate the solvent off. And then you could get these were mealworm beetles. You could get a male mealworm beetle to mate with the end of a glass rod, just because of the presence of the pheromones there. So it was a way of demonstrating how important pheromones are for insects. Just the presence of that, like, pheromone cocktail is enough to completely convince a male flower beetle at the end of a glass rod is a female beetle. And so these techniques of moving insect pheromones around have been around for a long time, and it was just applied to bed bugs. And solvents like hexane will take all of those organic compounds, VOCs, they're called volatile organic compounds, into solution, and then you can evaporate off the solvent and leave the organic compounds behind. Yeah.
So when we use this solvent, and we look inside the little bottle, we see male bed bugs. Do you or is it or do you also use different stages?
No, just adults from both sexes. But it seems to be the males that produce more of the hexanol. Both stages produce octanol and a range of other things. Yeah, both sexes.
When people are browsing through your shop, they can choose different sexes and also different stages of
live
the age.
bugs. Yeah.
So obviously we want our dogs to not only find alive bugs, but also bugs in all stages of age. Do you think that they are smelling differently, and more important for people who are not that deep in the topic or in the subject, do all stages of bed bugs eat from human blood, or only the adult ones?
Yeah. So all stages do feed from humans, and they all have they need one blood feed in order to molt to the next stage, and then they feed again and molt to the next stage. And there's 5 nymphal stages before they become an adult. So it takes 5 feeds to make an adult bed bug. We know that they don't all smell the same, because you can do experiments where bed bugs can choose preferentially hides that have been where males or females or nymphs have been. So there are behavioral studies with bed bugs that show that bed bugs can tell the difference between males and females and nymphs. But we don't necessarily know whether or not dogs can also. I mean, it's likely that dogs don't have that same recognition. It could be just very fine differences in ratios or presences of some of those organic compounds that allow bed bugs to determine whether a harborage has a male or females in. Males are finding females by smell. Males are recognizing other males by smell as well. And so definitely bed bugs can tell the difference. I'm not sure that dogs can tell the difference, but it's certainly helpful to try with different numbers. Sometimes you find a bed bug harborage and it's got 20 or 30 or 50, and sometimes it's just got, sometimes it's just one bug hiding on its own. Okay. And so it can be helpful for the dog handlers tend to like to choose like a small number of bugs, or just nymphs, or just adults. Yeah, it's definitely good to try all different things so that they've experienced the options. Yeah.
So we've learned that they need to feed to grow. How often would they visit a human being for growing to the next stage? Once a week or once a month?
Yeah, once a week. Yeah, if it's warm, then once a week. Yeah.
Okay.
They'll feed slightly faster. We culture them at 26 degrees C, and then it could be like 5 to 6 days. But generally in a normal room, something like once a week. Yeah. And so maybe
the crazy thing is
something like a couple of months. Yeah.
The crazy thing is that they survive very low temperatures as well. I think below 70 degrees Celsius, that's where it gets dangerous, or am I wrong?
Below 70, sorry, did you say below 70?
17.
That will get, that's a household freezer is minus 17. You can kill them. You can kill them at just below 0.
But that's yeah.
You can kill them at
temperatures are dangerous for them.
Yeah, I would say as long as they're above freezing, they're fine. If you put a bug into a household freezer, it'll die very quickly. It tends to take a long time if you might be putting infested clothing into a freezer in order to get rid of the bed bugs, and then it can take 24 hours or something for the temperature to get low enough in the center of the clothing to kill them. But generally, when we send bed bugs to people, we never have problems with them dying in transit if it's maybe above -5. Probably below -5, we start to have problems. And sometimes if we're sending them to Canada in the middle of winter, we really struggle. If it's -20 or something, then they don't have to be outside for very long to get that cold. we just try and keep them above freezing. Yeah.
Talking about temperature rising, because that's also one of the methods of the pest control to kill them by heat. Then it should be above 42 degrees. Or
someone told me 45. In fact, I saw a nice video where there was a load of bed bugs and a thermometer, and it was pretty much bang on 45 where they were all dead. And so heat treatments tend to aim for kind of 50, 55. And if they go much above 60, they can cause the first problem tends to be that the melamine edging in the hotel starts to peel off.
Yeah, sure. But I think that's also one of the biggest struggles for the pest control, because creating heat, it's not like it's hot like this, and the bugs have enough time to flee.
That's an important consideration. You can drive them through building. You can drive them from one building to the next. One of my expert witness cases recently, this happened. It was treatment of bed bugs in one house that was pushing bed bugs into the next house, just through little gaps in the mortar line and stuff like that. And so it's definitely a consideration when you're doing heat treatments where the bugs are and where they're likely to go. But it can work very well in a hotel. The bed bugs will almost always be inside the bed base or behind a fixed headboard, and generally the temperature around the room gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and the bugs become trapped in kind of an island, trapped inside the bed base where there's a bit of shelter from the heat, and the temperature reaches a point where the bugs panic and they make a break for it. They run to escape the heat, and because all of the air around them is already much hotter, they just drop to the floor and die. And so in hotels, heat treatments tend to work very well. It tends to be these old buildings where bugs can get into the walls. If bugs can get into wall cavities, then it becomes really difficult with heat, because you just push them around the building.
Yeah. Understand.
So it also depends how well sealed the room is. If it's well plastered and if it's got a good fitting floor and fitting carpets and things, then heat works well. But if it's gappy floorboards leading to gappy brick, like gaps between the bricks between the buildings, then you can push the bugs into the wall cavities, and then it can take months before they finish emerging from the they can survive in a cold wall cavity for a long time. So it can take a long time before you know that they've definitely gone if you've chased them all into there.
So sometimes our handlers like they're also developing an eye for bed bugs, of course. And sometimes they lift the mattresses and they see on the beds these little spots and stains, and guess that those are have been bed bugs defecating. How sure could we say that if there are these bed bug stains and that they're really close? When do they defecate? Do they defecate after eating or halfway home? Or is there a rule of thumb?
They can even start defecating while they're feeding. It has a special name. It's called micturition. It's like the process of filtering out the water so that you can squeeze more blood in. So they're filtering it straight away to get rid of the excess water so they can get as much protein as possible. So it can happen on your skin.
Okay.
But then it can also happen on the way home. So they will leave spots across the bedding. But most of the spotting will happen around that harbourage where they'll be aggregated into a little cluster behind a fold of fabric or in a little crevice, and all of the area around that hiding place will be peppered with lots of black spots. And I think that's part of the signal that helps them find their way home.
So with these with these circumstances, it's warm, as you said, around 26 degrees or room temperature plus minus. How fast would they breed, and how fast would they become a big problem?
So I just to add to the previous point about telling the difference between the feces. The main things that you can be confused with are flies and spiders. And so if you're seeing clusters of feces on the tops of the skirting boards behind the bed, it's very often the case that there's been a spider web between the bed and the wall over there, and the spots are just dropping onto there. And that spider web can be brushed away weeks before, but the spots will stay there for a long time. So the location of the spots is really important. So if you're finding the spots around a little crevice, very likely bed bugs, but it can look similar in different, on the top, along the top of a skirting board or along a window ledge or something like that. It's very often spiders. Sometimes spiders can leave spots on the bedding, and if the spots are high up, like on the ceiling or high up on the walls, then it's usually flies. Yeah. So there's different options. Those are really the main ones. You can even there are some forensic blood detection kits that can detect the hemoglobin in the fecal spot. One of them is called the Bed Bug Blue fecal detection kit, and it uses the forensic blood detection kind of chemistry to work, but it can tell the difference between these types of fecal spots. So that can be a useful way if you're not sure. Yeah. But in terms of how long it takes, sorry, do you want to speak?
No, do you like? I've never seen these sets. Do you sell them?
I don't sell them, but you can buy them on Amazon. I can send you a link so I can show you where to look. Yeah,
for sure. That would be interesting.
It's like a little swab thing that makes a blue line if it is bed bugs, and it's just detecting the blood, the hemoglobin from the blood. Yeah, yeah, can be a useful tool. If you're just finding one spot or two spots sort of on the mattress somewhere, and it's unclear whether it could have been a bed bug or could have been something else, they can be a useful tool. Yeah. In terms of how long it takes for infestations to establish, normally you could imagine that one bug has arrived. It might be a if it's a male or if it's a nymph, then that bug will just live there, but it won't be able to reproduce. But if it's a female, there's a good chance that it has mated, and if it's mated, then it can lay eggs for something like 5 weeks before it needs to remate. If it's got regular access to food and it's laying eggs, it can produce something like 25 to 30 eggs a week if it's in like optimal conditions, if it's nice and warm. And so if it's nice and warm with regular access to food, you can get quite a lot of nymphs quite quickly. And then it would take something like 2 months for those first eggs to reach maturity. And at that point, you would have lots of adults that all have the capacity for laying eggs. So after that 2-month window, the population can start to increase much more rapidly.
That's crazy. What was the worst case that you have ever witnessed concerning bed bugs?
I mean, yeah. So all of the worst cases I've been to have always been in London, and there's always some kind of underlying social issue that's meant that because in most cases people notice that they're getting bitten and they call a pest controller and someone comes and deals with it, and then there's maybe there's tens of bugs, 10 to 20 or maybe 30 if it's quite bad. But every now and then it gets you find one that's really much more severe. There can be 100,000 bed bugs or more than that. And that always happens when there's some kind of underlying social issue, like the person is blind or very elderly, and no one comes to see them, mental health issues, and that makes it, that means that no one notices or no one does anything about it. And I've seen a few of these. I saw one quite recently where the client who commissioned me was living next door to a property that was used for low-income housing, and one of these flats had just become horrendously infested with bed bugs, and often people on low income often fear being made to pay for the treatment, and so they will often try and treat it themselves with whatever they can buy from the hardware store. But usually these chemicals are not very strong. They're much weaker than the professional strength insecticides. And so often that's like the cause of dispersal, because if you're spraying around fly spray, it tends to flush all the bed bugs out of your bed and scatters the population. And then you could start having more of them coming through the walls. This family collected more than 430 bed bugs over 6 months coming through the walls from the neighboring property. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. And that's also an important point for all the listeners or the viewers, because sometimes it's really not your fault, or well, actually it is not your fault, because you can pick them up at any place, and you shouldn't have a bad feeling when having them. Just be quick and call a professional to get rid of them. And that's something that we have faced a few times, that people are like ashamed of having them, but it wasn't really their fault.
Yeah, and I think that helps the bed bugs because that means that people are very reluctant to talk to their neighbours and find out if it's a building wide problem, or if it's just, if it's just in one person's apartment, then it could be that they brought them in and maybe it's their responsibility. But if the bugs are coming from the neighbouring apartments, then they'll keep on coming until the building wide problem is resolved. And bed bugs moving around in apartment buildings, you really need a kind of building wide strategy to tackle it. But if everyone's sitting in their apartment not telling anyone else that there is a problem, then it becomes hard to get that kind of joined up thinking to solve the wider bed bug issue in the building. Yeah.
And that goes through all kinds of our community. So from the poorest to the richest, everyone can have these little unwanted pets in their homes.
And for a really long time, the ancient Egyptians had them, and the Romans had them, and they've really been a problem for as long as there's been civilized humans. Yeah.
What's the most frequent asked questions that you hear about bed bugs?
I get lots of. I spend a few hours every day responding to emails from the public. Very often they're getting bites and believe that they have bed bugs, and I help them with trying to figure out what's going on, where they're coming from. Sometimes they wake up one day and they've got 50 bites on them, and their conclusion is it's bed bugs, because bed bugs receive a lot of publicity in the media, so it's usually the first thing people fear when they come out in bites. But it would never be the case that a bed bug that you could suddenly get lots of bites from bed bugs, because the population would increase quite slowly over time. So there's other things. Sometimes it's people reacting to carpet beetles are a common cause. Carpet beetles are very common in homes, especially in the dust and debris around beds, and their larvae are hairy. And if one of these hairy larvae crawls through your bedding and you sleep on it at night, then you'll wake up with something like bites, and those often confuse people into thinking that they have bed bugs. So I probably spend more time helping people who think that they have bed bugs than the ones who actually do have bed bugs. Bed bugs aren't all that difficult to find. They leave lots of these inky black spots everywhere, and if you make a careful search of the bed, they're the size of apple seeds or something. So if you make a careful search of the bed, normally you can find them. And sometimes you need the help of a dog team, particularly if you have a big hollow bed base or a fixed headboard that you can't see behind. Dogs are really good at sniffing out those inaccessible voids, but generally it's not so difficult to find bed bugs if they're there. But it's hard to identify what's causing the bites if it's something else.
Sure. What's your suggestion to people who want to avoid bringing bed bugs back home?
So bed bugs won't normally travel on your person; they normally travel on your things. And so, really, the best way to get bed bugs is to go to a backpacking hostel or a hotel and open your bags and leave them out on the bed overnight, so that all your stuff is spread out. Because that night the bugs will come out searching around to feed, and then they'll crawl into your stuff, and you'll just take them away again. And it was never the bug's intention to be taken away anywhere; it was just looking for somewhere to hide that was in a convenient location. So just don't do that. Put your bags on a bag stand if they've got them. You're better off with like a hard shell suitcase. If you're traveling with a hard shell suitcase, it's much more difficult for bed bugs to climb in. They're not very good at climbing on shiny surfaces. So rucksacks are very good for bed bugs. Lots of pockets and zips and places to hide. So keeping your belongings away from the bed. Don't leave your jacket on the bed overnight, particularly overnight. Bed bugs are mostly nocturnal, so they'll come out at night, crawl around, and then crawl into your stuff. So keep your stuff off the bed and away from the bed. And then just those simple steps, and you've got very little chance of taking them with you, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that gave a great impression into the subject of bed bugs for people who haven't yet heard a lot about it, and as well for all of those who are probably frequently hunting them down. How is your dog? And have you started training your own dog on bed bugs yet?
Yeah, no, he's great. He's 7 or 8 months old, and he's a border collie. He's very intelligent, so we have to be doing stuff with him all the time. obsessed by fetch and things like that. So I think he would be a very good. He's got that kind of ADHD mindset that seems to be good for being a detection dog, because they'll do the same thing all day and never get bored. But no, we haven't made big progress into making him a bedbug dog yet. I live in a really rural location, and we don't have many bedbugs around here. You know, they're mainly a city problem. Of course, anyone can bring them back, but it's not common in I live in the Forest of Dean, so it's not common where we are, because there's not enough density of people to support good bedbug populations. So they occasionally turn up when people bring them back from traveling, but it's probably not a business to detect them where I live. Yeah.
Okay. So if it wasn't the bed bugs that you focused on, what would it have been otherwise?
You mean when I was studying zoology, which the direction I went in, I could have been interested in all sorts of different areas of like natural history. I mean, I was brought up on natural history. My parents made the David Attenborough films, and so I've always had like a passion for wildlife and photography of wildlife and keeping. I've kept all sorts of different animals, chameleons and snakes and reptiles and tarantulas and scorpions and millipedes and stick insects and all these sorts of things. So I've always had an interest in living things. Yeah. So it could have gone anywhere. It was really just circumstance that led it towards bed bugs. And then the more I specialized, the more demand there was for someone who knew about bed bugs. It was like forces outside my control, really, that meant that I kept being kind of asked to do more and more stuff related to bed bugs. You know, I now test products against them, and I give lectures about them and write articles on them and all sorts of things, but all bed bug related. Yeah.
So what will the future bring with them bugs?
Well, there's still a growing problem, and there's still lots of R&D into producing new solutions. There's still a lot of development into new traps and ways of monitoring for them. There are some traps now that produce carbon dioxide and heat to mimic a warm-blooded human. There are repellents. There are new insecticide sprays based on fungal spores. All sorts of things. So I'm never short of things to do, really. There's always people asking me to test some new bedbug related thing. Yeah.
Last but not least, and Richard was kind enough to remind me of the question of my previous guest, because he asked who will be the next guest. So my previous guest was Bully Canine, which is a team of trainers who are in police dog work, and Björn Wunder, who is the head trainer there, asked the question, not knowing that I would be interviewing you. So his question was, how can you support the canine industry?
What do you mean? How can I support it, though?
So well, obviously you help us get send samples to provide better training, and obviously this is one of the big things that you're doing. But also, I guess, well, you could help out people like us in understanding how to detect bed bugs in a better way, because you're you're studying them all the time.
Yeah, so I do travel around, mostly Western Europe, and I give talks to detection teams and help fill in that bit of knowledge about the insect. You know, they can have lots of training in the use of the dog, and but they often won't be able to recognize different insect species. Well, one thing that I do a lot of is identifying specimens for people, and that's often dog teams that have gone out and found something, or the customer has found something. And it's just helpful for them to have like a backup where they can say, you know, I don't know what this insect is, but I know the guy that does. And so it allows them to provide a more full service. So I support them that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the end, the whole episode that we did was the answer to this question, because you're specializing on you're not the dog person, you're the bed bug guy.
That's right. Yeah.
And who is an expert on this topic, providing us dog people with all these insights and facts and knowledge. So I think that's a big help. And also I'm very grateful that you're sharing this knowledge on the podcast. So that's a big help. What would be your question? And unfortunately, I have no clue who my next guest will be. I have some guys in mind, English speakers, German speakers, scientists like yourself, but also dog trainers. But yet I can't tell who will be the fastest to say I have a free date.
Okay, sure. So who would I recommend?
No, not whom you would recommend, but what would your question be? Not knowing who will answer it.
No, okay. What would my question be of the detection dog industry generally?
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that. What my question?
Yeah, it's a hard question to think of a question.
I'm sure I'm going to have hundreds of questions once I start doing scent work with my dog. Yeah. Yeah.
But also the question doesn't have to be detection wise. It could be also just about dogs in our community or building a business.
Yeah, but I mean, building a business it seems to be a huge challenge. Lots of people that I supply bugs to get past the first stage of training up a bed bug dog and it performing to a good level, and then they have to take the next step, which is turning that into a business, and that seems to be a huge step. I don't know if that's something that someone will be able to ask. If anyone has insights in that, it would be interesting to know, because I think it's probably less than 10% maybe that are still doing it maybe after a year or two. And perhaps it's even less. Yeah. So it seems to be very difficult to build a business. You have to factor in how you're going to share the fact that you've got this asset. So you have to, contact hotels and things and say that you can provide the service. But often if you contact hotels, you get a receptionist. So they're very like impenetrable to get through to anyone who can actually make any decisions. Yeah. So it's really difficult. I'd like to be able to help the dog teams more to be able to turn their bed bug detecting dog into a viable business. I spend a lot of time thinking about how to support them in that way, but yeah.
So what would the question then be? Like, what's the hardest struggle in building your business?
What's the strategy for? I guess from someone who's built a successful business, what's the strategy in getting teams getting customers to use bed bug dogs? So the alternative is that they contract in pest controllers who don't use detection dogs, and everything is done by visual search. So they have to understand that there's a huge time benefit in having dogs do the searching rather than a person. And the traps are not very effective at the moment, so you can't rely on them for early detection. So I think that dogs provide a real asset, but it's very difficult to share that with someone who runs a hotel chain that's able to make the decisions about that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's I think that will be an interesting question. As I said, I have no clue yet who will be happy enough to answer it. But as soon as that episode will be launched, I will let you know for sure. If it's in German, I will translate it for you.
Thank you.
So once again, thank you very much. I'm sure the listeners and viewers, the audience, enjoyed it as much as I did. If you have any questions, please reach out to Dr. Richard Naylor. You will find all the data to contact him on the website that I will also put into the show notes.
Yeah, there's two sites, and the other one. So there's the one site that you talked about, which is the Cymex store, which is where we sell bed bugs for the dog trainers. But there's also the Bed Bug Foundation website, and this is much more of a useful website for people who want to understand information about bed bugs and how they spread and how to control them. And it also has the identification service, specimen identification service. So if you find things or You know, if you find spots on the bedding and you want a second opinion about whether it's likely to be from bed bugs, you can take a photo and you can send it to the email on that site.
Right. I didn't know that.
Will help you
So
with your detection. Yeah.
I will add the Bed Bug Foundation as well. Sure. Great. Anything else, Richard?
No, that's all from me.
Anything else that I've? Do you have a social media account where you post?
I think my wife manages a LinkedIn account. I don't do much of social media if I can help it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So you're not wasting a lot of time.
Emails. It's a battle to keep up with emails at the rate that they come in. So I can't add any other routes to my inbox.
Sure. Wow. Yeah. Well, cool. I totally forgot about the Bed Bug Foundation. Yeah, sure. So people can find you there as well. And if you like the show, like, share, and subscribe. Tell all your friends about it. And if you think you might have a bed bug problem, well, then send the photos to Richard. Awesome. Thank you so much again.